It's akin to the concept of geometry dash that some players would be better than others. With the demand to push the limits of what's humanly possible in this game becoming a norm that's steadily been built on over the years, we have seen countless feats achieved by amazing players who have grown not only themselves, but the community in the process. Awe-inspiring victories have sprouted from so many corners of the world, and seeing the best players pour their souls into extreme demons and push the boundaries of the realm of possibility is something that we all enjoy following. However, there's always been a difference between a player who focuses their entire energy of force on one extremely hard level, and a player who is so skilled that they can beat the hardest of demons in sometimes mere thousands of attempts. These are the players that are years ahead of their competition, having no one who can even stand up to them in terms of skill for their time. We have had countless top players who have come and gone in this game's history, but the ones that stand out are the ones that reigned unmatched at the top, whether it was for years or only a few months. In this video, I'm going to be taking us back through time to take a look at 10 of these legends of this game's history through chronological order. These players are all going to be ones that were so far ahead of others at the time that they essentially had no competition, and I will be looking at them in order from oldest to newest. I will be going over their backstory, major achievements, talk about why they were so far ahead of the game, and what their legacy is today on top of that. Before I go ahead and start listing off the players, I just want to address the fact that I limited the amount of players on here down to only 10, meaning I couldn't include everyone. This video is incredibly long despite that, so I hope you guys understand why I couldn't include any more. I don't doubt that there are countless players that could have been worthy of a mention on this list that didn't manage to make it, and there were quite a few it pained me not to include. But there was a lot of thought put into each choice, and some factors ruled out some players over others. Before the final entry on this list, I will be addressing a few disclaimers relating to a few specific players and why I didn't include them, even though it might seem like they should have been added. So don't assume I entirely ignored someone when in reality there was a good reason they aren't on the video. There isn't much else to say besides that, and we have a lot to unpack from here on, so let's get started. The first player we're going to talk about today is a forgotten but nonetheless very skilled demon grinder and creator from the 1.9 era. Red Universe is a very unknown and underrated player, and it's a shame we don't talk about him more when discussing who was the best back in the days of early 1.9, as he would have definitely been worthy of a mention. Red Universe might sound like a familiar name to you, and there's definitely a good reason for that, but we will touch on why in a bit. Like I said, Red started out in 1.9, and his first upload on his YouTube channel will be a verification video of his level Ultimate 2P Fly 2. This would be a well-designed 1.9 level, and while it didn't stand out a ton, it had cool gameplay and interesting effects that showed how Red was an avid creator with unique ideas alongside his playing ability. He continued to upload on his YouTube channel from here onward, beating some pretty easy levels in demons. Something interesting to consider is that Red was a mobile player at this point in time, and though he would make the switch to PC eventually, he stood out amongst a large portion of the community that was making the shift to more advanced hardware to accompany their playing. He would continue to focus on creating over playing at this stage in his career for the most part, though, and he would release 3 levels in the next few months, these being Impact Crater, Time Chaos, and Crystal Color. These levels, again, would be solid works, but they would take inspiration pretty obviously from some other levels at the time, and they weren't groundbreaking. However, Red becoming further well-versed in the editor is something that would contribute greatly to his legacy, as we will see later. He continued to beat some difficult levels for his time, such as Ditched Machine and Decode, but his biggest achievement would come soon after that. This would be completing Deadly Clubstep on mobile, an absolutely insane achievement in 1.9, and akin to all his other notable feats, it appeared that he didn't have to put in that much effort to complete it. This was still very close to when Riot had beat DC on one of his best achievements on 144Hz. And here was Red beating it on mobile with close to no recognition or reaction when Red likely beat it in less attempts than Riot. If this doesn't prove how underrated he was at the time, then just wait, because it gets better. He wouldn't stop here, with his next big accomplishment being Supersonic, again on mobile. This was a recently released level, and he was one of the first to beat it, clearing it before the likes of even Alex Payne. Again, he was an insanely dedicated, fast, and skilled player, and he would only improve from here. He continued beating many difficult demons, with Breakthrough by Heinz being one that stands out amongst the rest. And as he continued to beat more and more difficult levels, he would clear one that would not only be an impressive achievement, but a demon that would shape a huge part of his legacy. On May 11th, 2015, he beat 9 Circles by Zobros, a very hard demon for his time. It's likely that this victory was on mobile as well. This is a very famous level, and it would be the demon to inspire Red's next project. After continuing to beat multiple decently challenging maps, on June 20th, 2015, he would preview his next level, a dark red 9 Circles level with the song Sweet Dreams by Nigtkiller. It's unclear whether he was a PC or mobile player at this point, but with the possibility that he would have still been playing on a mobile device, the difficulty of this level was mind-blowing. It was definitely the hardest 9 circles level the game had seen up to this point, and though the preview wasn't very long, the insanity it entailed was shocking to the few who viewed it. After previewing his new project, he would go back to beating demons, completing a very difficult level in the form of Ice Cream by Cyclic. He would keep beating easier demons, but something bigger was coming. On July 19th, 2015, he would finally verify his legendary demon Crimson Clutter live on stream. Crimson Clutter was the secret project he had revealed a month prior, and it was absolutely insane difficulty-wise. It was by far the hardest 9 circles level that had been released at the time, and it was put in the top 3. It would solidify a very steady position in the top 10 as the month passed, and this was a very feared addition to the 9 circles series. This would be the biggest spike of attention Red had gotten in his entire career, and though he beat incredibly difficult levels before CC with barely any attention, it was his crowning achievement that finally got him the recognition he deserved. From here, he would continue to beat levels such as Plasma Pulse, Infrared, Stalemate, and a few others, and he would further this into 2.0. In the new update, he would beat Downbass, Sharp Minor, Ultrasonic, Ultraviolet, and Ruin Journey, but from here, he would start to get into Osu and Tohu, winding down his GD career. He would essentially stop beating demons, with an odd exception popping up here and there, but in the past 3 years he's only beaten 2 demons on his channel. He did start making GD animations on the channel Uni Anims, and he has mostly transitioned to that as his main channel today. He doesn't upload GD animations as often anymore, but he does make one every now and then. However, his retreat into this new channel definitely does not undermine his incredible achievements as a player back in 1.9. From Deadly Clubstep on mobile to Crimson Clutter, Red has had an all but unrecognized career that needs to have more light shined on it, as when it comes to the discussion of best players for their time, he's definitely up there. He's a mostly forgotten player now, but hopefully this video can do him some justice and secure an aspect of his legacy as a legendary but underrated player of 1.9. The second player we have to talk about today is one that was at his prime back in 1.9, and though he's all but disappeared from the game today and there isn't much documentation about his history, he's still a very worthy mention in this video. Alex Payne is a veteran of the game, and though he's not around anymore, he played right from the start and rose to the top of the playing scene in 1.9. Like I said, Alex Payne has been around since the beginning of the game, and his first Geometry Dash video on his channel was an upload of Stereo Madness. This is one of the first Stereo Madness completion videos on YouTube at the time. He would continue to complete all the main levels from here, and today all his old recordings of them have over 100,000 views each, showing how integral he was as a member of the community. Alongside being one of the best players, he was a huge pioneer of uploading Geometry Dash completions to YouTube. Alex would continue to upload more GD videos, beating some easy demons that, at the time of completion, would be some of the hardest levels in the game. He would be one of the first to beat Clubstep when it was released, and though this is not an impressive feat for today's standards by any means, you have to remember that this was considered to be one of, if not the hardest demon at the time. He would continue to beat the most difficult levels around, and though the things he beat are considered entry-level easy demons today, such as Buck Force and Apocalypse Eve, they are near the limits of the small community there was at the time, and Alex was one of the only ones who was able to steamroll through them. Alex continued to improve even further when 1.9 got released. He would be one of the first to beat Blast Processing and Theory of Everything too, which continued to give him regard as one of, if not the best player around. 1.9 would be where his career would truly take off. Keep in mind that up until this point, he had been a mobile player, with the Steam version not being released until the 1.9 update. With his extra skill boost from transitioning to being a PC player, he would move on to beating demons that gradually ramped up in difficulty, and eventually he completed Theory of Skrillex, one of the hardest levels of the time. He did not stop there though. After this, he beat Doomsday 2, Theory of Firepower, and Insidious Step. But compared to his next achievement, these were all minor accomplishments. Zobros had recently released his extremely difficult level 9 Circles, which made use of the newly implemented Wave game mode, and Alex Payne was one of the first to beat this insanely difficult demon. Again, this was one of the top hardest levels at the time of completion, and he was proving time and time again that he was one of the best players in the world. With 9 circles out of the way, Alex had a ton of momentum. He would use this to continue beating the hardest levels in the game. His next challenge would be to undertake Deadly Clubstep, and this mammoth level would take him just under 10,000 attempts to clear. Obviously, this level was hack verified by Neptune, but in 1.9 it was considered one of the hardest levels in the game. He He would then focus on Windy Landscape by Wushi, another very hard demon, and he was sweeping through the hardest levels one by one. This would take him 13k attempts to beat. He was not only proving his skill but his incredible determination. However, his next achievement would be his most famous. In June of 2015, Payne would beat the newly released top demon Supersonic in 17k attempts in 2 weeks, which would gain him huge notoriety around the community. He was one of the very first to clear this insane challenge. He had once again proven his determination and raw talent at GD. From here, he would begin to phase out of playing as much, and as the new hardest levels were released, he didn't attempt them like he did with 9 Circles and Supersonic. He would continue beating demons here and there, clearing Deadlocked when it was first released to 2.0, but he wouldn't continue to be the hardest of the hard like he had back in 1.9. As the months went on, he wouldn't upload as much, and the months turned to years. It was already 2.1, and unfortunately, Alex couldn't keep up with the rapidly increasing skill level of the community. However, none of that undermines his achievements and ability he had when he was in his prime. While he was an active player, he beat the hardest levels before anyone else could, and he swept through the hardest demons without much sweat. This is a true demonstration of a top player, and though modern skill has moved far beyond his ability, Alex was definitely one of the best GD players of his time. The third player we have to talk about today is another legend from 1.9, Zobros. Zobros is one of the most infamous players and creators in this game's history, and though he's all but quit the game now, he's incredibly well remembered for his astronomical skill and creating ability alike. Zobros began his career in 2014, sweeping through some very difficult demons in mere days, and he gained quite a bit of notoriety from this. He showed incredible promise as a player from the beginning, but his ability was nowhere near its peak at this point in time. He uploaded his completions to his YouTube channel, and he was known for beating multiple difficult demons all in one day. At the turn of the year in 2015, Zobros would continue to smash demons left and right alongside his iconic texture pack that established the brand we know him so well for today. He would continue to beat demons, but he would also dabble in creating a fair bit, which would be a hobby he would build on in the coming months. Something was brewing, and though he showed no sign of it as he continued to slice some of the hardest levels of the time, an iconic level was in the works that would change GD forever. On January 17th of 2015, Zobros would release a legendary level that would not only blow up for its difficulty, but also its design, 9 Circles. 9 Circles was a very unique level that took a spin on the health theme that it established in other levels like Cataclysm, but it did not execute it in the same way, which gave it a fresh feeling. 9 Circles was an incredibly well-designed level for its time, with every part of the level looking excellent. However, nothing really stood out too much at the pre-drop sections. The main claim to fame of this level is its wave parts. The neon colors with the pulsing wave effect would become a signature style of Geometry Dash creating, and the difficulty it entailed with the Assault on Your Eyes made it one of the most feared demons of the time. This level brought Zobros fame from many corners of the community, and I'm sure you all know how it would go to inspire demons like Fairy Dust, Crimson Clutter, Poltergeist, Sonic Wave, and plenty other popular 1.9 demons, as well as some famous top extremes we know today, such as Arctic Lights, Aquatic Auroras, Hyper Paracosm, Balsha Vortex, and so many more. Zobros wouldn't stop here, though. He would continue his streak of beating some of the hardest demons and calling them overrated, cementing his position as one of the best players in the world. He would beat Ice Cream by Cyclic for his 300th demon, an incredibly difficult level that is one of his more unknown but impressive achievements. He would follow this up by releasing another level, Acropolis, which today is a benchmark demon that was one of the hardest timing levels for its period, not to mention one of the best looking ones. With this, Zobros established himself as not only an incredible demon slayer, but a creator as well, and he was undoubtedly one of the best mixed players of the time. He would then beat Windy Landscape by Wushi as his next notable demon victory and release Forsaken Neon as his next level, a collab with Triaxis, which really solidified his ability as a creator. Alongside this, he added Swing Squad to his repertoire of uploaded demons, a lesser known but difficult collab with some other notable creators. Unfortunately, he would soon reveal that he had been diagnosed with a severe hand disorder that heavily limited his ability to play the game, which explained his retreat into creating instead of playing as much as he used to. Zobros would take a short break after this, but he would soon come back with a new level, a collab with Etzer. This would turn out to be the infamous demon Ado. Again, Zobros brought an incredibly unique level to the table, with the entire drop section being composed of mostly ship gameplay with cool effects. This was something that Zobros seemed to like to do. If you take a look at 9 Circles and its effects, they follow a similar formula that Ado does, having a mostly single game mode drop with an iconic effect. Something interesting to consider is that we could have seen Ado remake level instead of 9 Circles once, as they would have been just as recognizable and doable. Anyway, this would be Zobros' 6th level released in a 7-month period, with 4 of them being some of the most iconic levels in the game's history. This is a really mind-blowing thing to think about, and Zobros was really a legend of both creating and playing. Ado was a very hard demon for its time, and he would follow this verification with beating Light Wave, which is another very, very difficult level. The final move Zobros would make in 1.9 would be his verification of his level Ultimate Demon Mix, a combination of some of the hardest levels of the game I've seen in its history. This is a very well-known level today, and though it's not original like his other ones, it's another thing that furthered his legacy as a famous creator. Zobros would begin 2.0 by releasing Luminium, one of his much lesser-known levels. He also did an amazing run of 52 and 100 on Silent Club, showing that he was still playing the game alongside creating. He would, though, get bored of GD in the coming months, but he returned to playing in 2016, beating El Dorado and Fusion. However, he was growing away from the game slowly but surely, and he would soon upload Love Baba, a joke level that showed his disinterest in the game. He would stop playing entirely after this, falling out of the top 100 and not uploading anything else to his YouTube channel. This would be a sad end to one of the greatest players in the game's history, but there's no doubt that Zobros was one of the best players to touch the game back in 1.9, and his skill and legacy will not be forgotten. The next player we have for today is definitely someone you all saw coming. Riot is definitely one of, if not the most famous player in the history of Geometry Dash, and this is for good reason. A god of 1.9 and a player that seemingly no one could touch when he was at his best, Riot inspired many and was definitely one of the greatest for his era. Like many players, Riot would start out on mobile, beating some benchmark easy demons and the main levels. Though he wouldn't become famous for being a mobile player, as the months progressed he managed to beat some pretty hard stuff for his time. This was all prior to Geometry Dash's 1.9 version being released, but when it was, Riot would switch to PC and begin streaming the game. This would begin his rise to power as one of the best of the best. His first big claim to fame was clearing Deadly Clubstep by Neptune, a very hard level for its time. This would give him a significant amount of notoriety in the community, but it was nothing compared to what was coming in the future. He also vowed around this time to beat every rated 9 Circles level, and this was something that most people didn't believe, but that's something I will touch on later. 9 Circles levels would not be Riot's main focus as of now. That honor would fall to a level that had just recently gone into the community eye via Cyclic bringing it to fame, Cataclysm. Cyclic had just recently become the first to beat this ridiculous demon, and following him were Gyron and Sandstorm. On May 20th, Riot would join the club and become the 4th to beat this extreme demon. One day later, he would beat Necropolis by Neptune, becoming only the 2nd to do so in the world. But that was a minor achievement compared to his next feat. On May 23rd, Riot would beat Ice Carbon Diablo X, becoming the first player in the world to do so. As many know, this would be one of the first instances of straight flying being used as a viable method to beat levels of this difficulty. However, those would all be minor achievements compared to his next project. Soon after his victory over ICDX, Riot would preview the infamous demon Bloodbath. It was only a very short clip, but in it, there was some of the most difficult gameplay the community had ever seen at the time. It was clear something insane was happening, and whether Riot would follow through with this out-of-this-world project was something the community was eager to see. He uploaded a second preview soon after this, and the level showed clear parallels to Cataclysm, sharing not only the song but the theming. Bloodbath would have to wait, though, as it was not yet finished, and Riot continued to beat hard levels, continuing his progress on completing the 9 Circles series. He would also beat Windy Landscape in some of Michigan's temple levels. After clearing the likes of Jawbreaker, Poltergeist, 9 Circles, and Fairy Dust, Riot would turn his attention back to Bloodbath. He got 48% on BB on July 26th, and he would continue progress from here, achieving 58%, 65%, and then 90%. Victory was so close, and after a 94% fail to follow this, he finally verified Bloodbath. It was almost instantly rated and placed at number 1 on the hardest demons list, and it would hold this position for an insane amount of time. Riot would continue to beat the hardest levels, clearing Crimson Clutter and finally beating every rated 9 Circles demon at the time. 2.0 would be released shortly after this, and though Riot had had very tough competition in the earlier days of his career, with Cyclic gone and Andromeda outed for hacking, he was free to capitalize on the GD's player scene essentially unrivaled. In 2016, Riot would verify a difficulty update to Cataclysm, adding coins and changing up some parts to solidify the level in the demons list. After this, Riot began to progress on Cyclic's hacked dark blue version of Sonic Wave, an incredibly difficult level that would easily be number 1 on the list, if verified. He made some incredible progress, but eventually he would slow down playing and seemingly phase out from the game. But despite the rumors he was quitting, there was something brewing behind the scenes. Riot would soon preview the early versions of Yatagarasu on his channel, announcing that he was going to be verifying this beast of a level as the project to top Bloodbath. He would also announce that he was verifying Sonic Wave Infinity, a redesign and buff of Sonic Wave. Unfortunately, with his waning interest in the game, these two projects would eventually be dropped and left for other players to pick up, and we all know where both of them are today. Riot has recently returned to the game to try and finish off Sonic Wave once and for all with the reinstitution of his YouTube channel, but his skill can't compare to the skill of the top players we have today. However, there's no doubt that in his prime, Riot was one of the most legendary and skilled players to ever touch this game. Riot is an iconic demon slayer, and even though he's lost his ability to compete at the top of the bar today, he won't be forgotten as one of the best players for his time in history. Up next is the more unknown but nonetheless absolutely essential player for today's video. Blast CFB was a star of 2.0, and though he's all but left the game now alongside most others in the first half of this video, his skill was astronomical for his time. Unlike some other players in this list, Blast began playing the game at the start of 2.0, where many others had been in and around since very early on, which gave them a big head start. This only proves even more how ahead of his time Blast was. Starting off in 2.0, like I said, Blast beat some easy entry-level demons and quickly progressed to things such as Deadlocked. With how fast he was progressing, he showed a significant amount of promise to his small audience, and he would soon show off beating levels that got harder and harder. He beat some insane demons, and though they were not as impressive in 2.0 as they would have been back in 1.9, they were still demonstrating his incredible growth in such a short amount of time. He would soon beat a very unknown but interesting level, Acropolis by Keyblade Master, which was inspired by Acropolis by Zobros and was one of the hardest timing demons. This wasn't that big of a deal in itself, but it would set up for Blast to continue the level's legacy in the future. He would continue grinding hard levels, beating Deadly Clubstep by Neptune as his next big achievement, and Supersonic after that. He would follow this up with Windy Landscape, Acropolis, Ultrasonic, and many more difficult levels. He was beating significantly hard levels in short amounts of time, and his sudden growth from his humble beginnings at the start of 2.0 were insane. He began to practice Old Cataclysm after this for his first extreme, and he beat it within 5 days of grinding. Old Kata was still extremely hard for the time period Blast was playing in, and though 2.0 skill would progress much further than this, what Blast had beaten in his current time was a significant challenge. He would then beat the ultimate phase soon after, and he had just managed to clear 2 top 10 demons within a month from each other. Soon after this, he would preview his crowning levels to his channel. This would be his super buff of Acropolis, dubbed Acropolix. This is why I mentioned earlier that Acropolis was an essential level to his history, as from the previews we got, the level was looking to be incredibly difficult. The decoration was very lackluster at this stage, though, and the buffs were very inconsistent and confusing. After all, Acropolix was only meant to be around Acropolis difficulty, and was never intended to be an extreme in its beginnings. He would soon put Acropolix to the side and begin to focus on beating the hardest levels of the time, completing Crimson Clutter while still sat in the top 10 hardest levels. After CC, Blast would become the first victor of Acropolix, a very hard buff date and redesign of Acropolis by Zobros. Next, though, he would beat his new Harvest Demon in the form of Abazar Phantasm, which was an incredibly difficult level for his time period, in his first top 5. Blast was really evolving into a top competing player, and eyes from all over the community were beginning to rest on him. After this incredible victory, Blast would return to Acropolix. This time, the level would be redecorated and super buffed far beyond what we could have imagined. Despite the monumental difficulty, Blast would make quick work of this, verifying it in a mere 8,000 attempts. This definitely would have been a top 10 demon if rated at the time of release, but for some reason or another, Blast's crowning achievement was never rated. In fact, this level could have been the one to top Bloodbath if it was rated, but we'll never know for sure now. Blast announced his insane skill with this demon, and he wouldn't stop here. In another 8.5k attempts, Blast would slay the number 1 demon, Bloodbath, and it seemed nothing could stop him. His skill was just furthering and furthering. He was definitely a huge length ahead of all the other top players at the time. He set a new record for the lowest attempts to beat BB, and he beat it not only once, but twice. Beyond this, he became the second to beat Betrayal of Fate when it was first released, and would also beat ICDX, Red World Rebirth, The Hell Factory, and Conical Depression. These are all extreme demons, and it's clear to see how fast he was becoming at beating things and how far his natural skill had progressed since his early days. Not only this, but considering he only had begun playing the game at the start of 2.0, his advancement was remarkable. Blast would soon become one of the first to beat Phobos, Crazy Man 50's hardest verification, and it seemed like no level could get in his way of steamrolling extremes. But this isn't where his career began to fall off. No, he would only grow more and more from here. After Phobos, he would beat Athanatos and Sukup in Hell, both of which when they were number 1 on the demons list. But these two levels would pale in comparison to his next achievement. Verified a month earlier by Sonics, Blast would take on an incredible challenge that was easily the number 1 demon at the time, Sonic Wave. And somehow, despite his skill inflation seeming like it should have capped out by now, he beat it. Nothing was as impressive as this, and with his completion, he proved to the community that he was the best of the best, and cemented himself in history as one of the greatest players of all time. In a little over a year, Blast had come from beating easy demons to completing the hardest challenges the community knew at the time, and there was no level that came close to stopping him along the way. No level stood in the way of Blast, and every demon he attempted fell to him in stride. And this streak wouldn't stop here. After Sonic Wave, he would beat Artificial Ascent, Hatred, and Infernal Abyss, all newly released and very hard extreme demons. The final thing Blast would complete in this channel would be in 2.1, 3 years ago now, which would be the newly released GS Mega Collab verified by Trusta, Yatagarasu. This would be an incredibly difficult level, but sadly, like I said, this would be the last extreme demon completion Blast would upload. It's been 3 years since then, and his activity has been slim to none since. But this sudden drop of activity definitely doesn't undermine his ability as a player when he was still grinding the top demons. Like I said, no level could stop Blast, and he is the perfect example of a top player, beating new extremes and the hardest levels in ridiculously small amounts of attempts. Not even the hardest levels in the game could hold Blast back, and he was far beyond the rest of the community, arguably even being ahead of Sonics. Though his career was short, he went from being a run-of-the-mill player to becoming a legend. This short span of playing the game only further demonstrates his natural ability, and if he continued playing, there was a very good chance he would be a top player even today. During his peak, he would have definitely been considered the number 1 player, and though there's no telling for sure, he is definitely worth mentioning in the discussion of best GD player of all time. For our next player, we're going to be talking about a personality who some aren't too comfortable with, but one that has incredible skill despite his personal flaws. Hotball1 is a player who has been in and around the community for quite a while, and though he's moved on from the game today, he's definitely worthy of a mention in this video. When Hotball1 first started playing is unknown, and due to him privating all his old Geometry Dash videos, I cannot find any sort of recording of this, but we do know he started as a 60Hz player who attempted extreme demons. His first big achievement in the game was in 2.0, when he beat New Cataclysm on 60Hz after many devastating fails. He was also the youngest person to beat Cataclysm at the time. This was in April of 2016, and though he gained some attention from the completion, it wouldn't be significant enough to label him noteworthy. However, he didn't stop there. Only a month later, he would beat ICDX on 60Hz, another extreme demon that was still relatively hard alongside New Cataclysm in 2.0. Again, for a 60Hz player in a world that was revolutionized with top players having 144, both these levels within a month was an impressive feat. The next demon he would beat would be X Adventure. He was slowly gaining an audience as his skill grew. Unfortunately, after this he would stop playing hard levels for a decent while for some reason or another, but this wouldn't be where we would last see him. In 2017, he would come back and pick up a multitude of old projects he hadn't managed to complete, still on 60Hz, and these included The Hell Factory, Falling Up, Conical Depression, and A Bizarre Phantasm. For a 60Hz player at the time, these were all very hard levels, and even with his hardware disadvantage, he was managing to compete with the best players. He would also beat Duelo Maestro solo, and he was gaining a significant following for his skill. As 2017 continued, he would keep beating difficult levels for his 60Hz restraint, such as Creeper Force, Plasma Pulse 2 and 3, Allegiance, The Flawless, Aftermath, and a few others. These are all very impressive levels, but the real fun for Hotball would begin in 2018. Hotball was consistently getting better and better at the game over time, and when the new year rolled around, he would start out with a bang. Bloodbath was still a considerably difficult level at the time, and this held especially true for anyone playing on 60Hz, but this didn't stop Hotball from completing it. On February 11th, 2018, Hotball would become part of the small club of people who had managed to clear Bloodbath on 60. After this, Hotball would finally acquire a 144Hz monitor, something that he had been needing if he ever wanted to truly compete with the best of the best. And with his new hardware, he began an incredible sweep of some of the hardest demons in existence. He began this with Phobos, which took him a measly 500 attempts with his new monitor. He went on to beat Artificial Dream, a newly released extreme demon, in 2 hours including learning, and he expressed numerous times that the game was too easy for him. On the same day as this, while taking a quick break from streaming Bloodlust, he would beat Artificial Ascent in one attempt from 0. If this doesn't show how absolutely out of his world his skill was, then get ready, because it gets even crazier. He would go on to beat Sonic Wave, Digital Ascent, Erebus, and the #1 demon at the time, Bloodlust, in all a very short period of time after this. And there was something different about these completions compared to his 60Hz ones. He barely seemed to react in the description like he had with all his others, and he instead seemed to find the levels easy compared to the difficulty he faced on 60Hz. Hoppo would also be the first player to beat Bloodlust with no FPS bypass on 144Hz, and on April Fools, when he was put as a weekly demon, he would rebeat it in 50 attempts on stream. If that doesn't blow your mind, then I don't know what will, and Hoppo was truly one of the most ahead of his time players in this game's history. His skill level at the time even holds up to today's difficulty standards, which is absolutely insane 2 years on. After Bloodlust, Hoppo would begin to play the game less and less, focusing on other games, most notably Fortnite. Today, Hoppo runs a primarily Fortnite YouTube channel, and he has found good success in it. Though he developed a pretty toxic ego while he was in the GD community, nothing he did or said as a person could undermine his insane achievements and raw skill, and him on 240Hz today would have definitely been a sight to see. Starting as a primarily 60Hz player and rising to the top in an insanely short amount of time on 144Hz, Hoppo is definitely one of the greatest players this game has ever seen, and his legacy cannot be ignored. For my next entry, we're going to be talking about a more modern player who had a big career in early 2.1 as well as 2.0. I'm sure you all saw this one coming. Sonic's is a legend of Geometry Dash, being regarded as one of the fastest and most skilled list grinders to ever touch the game, and he definitely deserves a spot on this list. He was at his prime from 2.0 around to mid 2.1, and he has achieved countless significant accomplishments throughout this period. Sonic's began the game under the alias Deem, and he started up a YouTube channel in March of 2016, about a year into 2.0. His first video would be an upload of an easy demon, Motion, but in mere weeks he would start beating insane demons and getting progress on Cataclysm, showing how fast he was progressing and how promising of a player he was. He would beat some benchmark 9 circles demons as some of his bigger achievements, like Poltergeist and Sharp Minor. He was definitely best with the wave game mode over others, and this was demonstrated in these completion videos. He would go on from here to complete Cataclysm in 2,000 attempts in only months after he beat Motion, and his fast progress was almost screaming of great things to come. He would add a few more extremes to his repertoire from here, beating Conical Depression, ABP, Red World Rebirth, and a few others. He also beat Bloodbath, the #1 demon at the time, another very impressive feat. After this, he would begin rebranding himself to the version we all know him as today. His name went from Deem to Sonix, and his icons and colors swapped up entirely. With his new identity, he would not only beat Sukup in Hell, but also a Thanatos, making him the first legitimate victor of this hell-themed extreme demon. Those would be minor achievements compared to what was coming next, though. As I'm sure you all know, Sonic Wave was a hacked demon made by Cyclic back in 1.9, and despite the level being well over a year old, no one had managed to clear it. The closest someone had come was Mafui, as we all know, but no one had yet managed to verify it. This would lead to Sonic setting his eyes on this as the biggest thing he'd beat to get himself known as fast as possible. And on November 26, 2015, he verified it. This was the move that put him ahead of players like Riot for many in the community, as not even he was able to stand up to Sonic Wave and Sonic's mind-blowing skill. Sonic's blew up around the community after this, and he had come from beating Motion only half a year earlier to verifying Sonic Wave, the new #1 demon. He definitely would not stop here though. The next extreme to fall to him would be the newly released Yatagarasu, and though he pre-practiced a bit, this level would fall to Sonic's in a mere 3 days. After this, he would pick up Blade of Justice as his next verification, but drop it, as he wanted to focus on a bigger fish to fry. Legacy Sonic Wave Infinity was a super buffed version of Sonic Wave meant to be verified by Riot, complete with ridiculous timings and visual interference that would easily make it the #1 demon if verified. Sonic's undertook this challenge soon after Blade of Justice, and he would manage to get 48%. However, he just kept buffing it every time he would get far. In November of 2017, he would make it to 68%, the biggest record he would ever achieve on the level. With Sonic Wave Infinity as a side project, he would continue to beat the hardest demons, like Devil Vortex, Arctic Arena, Zaphakil, Carnage Mode, Erebus, Plasma Pulse Finale, Digital Descent, and so many more, all falling to him in stupidly short amounts of attempts. Nothing was stopping Sonic's, and having already beat the top few hardest levels, he He was just working his way down the list, picking off extreme demons that took average players months to beat. When a new extreme was released, he would beat it right away, and it seemed nothing can get in his way. However, soon things would start to slow down. There was one level that would serve as a roadblock in Sonic's way that would start to break down his motivation to play the game, and this would be Gamma, a top 5 mega collab by Minecap and more. I won't go into detail about how Minecap got Sonics to verify Gamma, as I already talked about that in my Greek letter series history video, but it would be the demon that would be the perfect storm for Sonics. It took him 3 weeks, an incredibly long amount of time compared to the mere days he was slaying the other top 50s in, and he would announce that he was starting to tire of GD and lose motivation. With this break being official, he would stop uploading GD to his channel as much, but he would return a few months later with the completion of Bloodlust by Mannix and more. This was the new #1 demon verified by Novelboy when released, and Sonics would beat it in a very short amount of time for its difficulty, showing he still had it. Unfortunately, after this he would go back to his retreat from Geometry Dash, focusing his channel instead on Osu. He strayed away from GD for about a year, but he would come back eventually, getting some progress on Zodiac and Crimson Planet among other things. Sadly, though, the top player skill progress had caught up to him, and it seemed like he couldn't bring himself above the bar the other more skilled players had now set. Though still very good at the game, he doesn't compare to what he was in 2.0 and early 2.1, where he was the only top player who could do what he did. From his Sonic Wave verification to the insane robotic speeds he beat top 50 demons, Sonics is definitely one of the best players this game has ever seen. His legacy for sure cannot be ignored in a video like this, and though he's mostly moved on from seriously grinding the game today, he won't be forgotten as a godly figurehead of the early 2.1 top player scene. For the next player worth mentioning in the best player of all time discussion, we have a grinder who made his name in mostly 2.1, becoming the first to beat several extreme demons that were well ahead of his time. The player in question is Wushi, a legend who reigned at the top after Sonics began to phase out from playing. Wushi began the game a few years back, likely sometime in 2016, and like a lot of players he started out on mobile. He would quickly get hooked on the game after downloading it and beat every main level in 2 weeks, progressing extremely quickly and getting a hang of the game in a very short amount of time. Eventually, he would get to the level of beating things like Deadly Clubstep on his iPad, and while this wasn't thoroughly impressive at the time, it was still a very hard level that showed promise. After Deadly Clubstep, he would go on to get the game on Steam on his 60Hz laptop, which gave him a skill boost that would start pushing him to beat harder levels. He progressed on Extreme soon after this, and he would eventually beat the Ultimate Phase, and he started up a YouTube channel where he would upload these replays. In 2017, he would get a 144Hz monitor, a common piece of equipment used by top players to take their skill to the next level. And this is where Wushi would really start to take off. He would get more and more addicted to the game, eventually taking a long break and deleting his YouTube, but he would come back in November of 2017 on a new channel completing Safakeel, a top 50 demon. This was an impressive feat, but he wouldn't stop here. His next accomplishment would be Erebus, a top 5 demon, which would take him a significantly minuscule amount of attempts. He couldn't be considered the best player at this moment in time, as Sonics was still a presence, but he would soon start to move away from the game after Gamma, and this would give Wushi the floor to capitalize as one of the most skilled upcoming list grinders. And this he would. He would continue slaying levels such as Stalemate Redux, Bloodbath, Digital Descent, Yatagarasu, Conical Depression, and Blade of Justice, with him beating Blade of Justice only 2 hours after its release. Sonics would start to become less and less active from here on, and at least until Bloodlust, but that wouldn't come for a while yet. With this in mind, it's a realistic idea that Wushi was one of, if not the best player around at this point in time. He only proved this further by beating Gamma and also picking up a new verification project for a top 1 demon that had been in the works for a while now, Crimson Planet. His first progress on CP would be on January 1st of 2019, when he would do a run of 63 to 100. He would get some more nice runs from here on out, but it would be a while before we would see significant progress on that, and he continued beating list extremes. However, something would interrupt this. Bloodlust would get verified and rated, an insanely difficult top 1 extreme that had been in the waiting for years now. This would bring players like Sonics back to attempt to beat it, and Wushi would join in on the race, but he wouldn't complete it. After Sonics beat Bloodlust, it seemed like he had come back and secured his position as the best player again, but Wushi was about to one-up him. On May 18th, 2018, Wushi proved it didn't matter that he didn't beat Bloodlust by verifying Crimson Planet, a level that would have for sure been the #1 demon over BL at the time if rated. I think people gloss over this when considering who the best player was during this period, as in reality, Wushi had verified the hardest level and had much more drive and skill behind him. Crimson Planet would only ever be topped on a theoretical demons list by Zodiac, which would come many months later, and this proves how ahead of his time Wushi was. Sonic would retreat away from the game again after Bloodlust, as we all know, though, and this would give Wushi further room to prove himself. His next mentionable achievements would be 64 to 100 on an unverified Tartarus, significant progress on Hyper Paracosm and Arctic Lights, and alongside this, progress on his new verification, Lucid Nightmares. Wushi would verify LN in January of 2019, estimating it as a number 4 demon, and he would continue to grind the list, beating things like Devil Vortex, God Eater, Sonic Wave, Plasma Pulse Finale, and Photovoltaic Act 2, among other things. He'd also get a crazy 41% record on unnerved innards, and if that's not enough proof he was one of the best players, then don't worry, because he did more. In March of 2019, he would get a 98% fail on the Yandere, a top 20 demon, for the fluke of 58. Not only this, but he also did it in under 4,000 attempts. However, this would also be around the time that players like Technical would start to come into their prime, when they would be overtaken as he started to become more and more inactive. He would still play the game often, undertaking projects like Quicksand and Renovant, which he would both drop, but he had been a fairly inconsistent player, and while previously that didn't affect his position as there was no one to challenge him, as new top players started to rise up and grind the list with momentum, he couldn't keep up. This doesn't take away from the fact that when he was on top, despite being not recognized for it, there's very solid evidence that points to him being the best player in the period between Sonic's and our next entry on the list. Despite him being heavily glossed over in most discussions about best players for certain time periods, when you take a look at his achievements compared to other players around, he was almost definitely the best in the awkward months that Sonic had left the stage open to be claimed. Wushi will be remembered for all his amazing achievements, and though he's a lot less active playing-wise today, his raw skill and accomplishments are remarkable, and he's worthy for the title as one of the best players in this game's history. The second to last top player we have for today is one who came from humble beginnings to rise up as one of the most recognizable and skilled players the game has ever seen. Though other players have overtaken him today, in the period in which he was number 1, he was undoubtedly the best, and he brought a new wave of difficulty to the Demons list with his accomplishments. Yes, I'm talking about Technical, a very famous top extreme demon slayer who today is one of the biggest followings in the active community. Tech started off playing GD on mobile, like most people, but his switch to PC did not come as soon as it did for others. He prided himself in beating hard demons on mobile, from Supersonic to Exploring Space, Psychosis, Future Circles, Breakthrough, and many more. He definitely was one of the best mobile players at the time, behind people like Pekoski. This would all be in early 2017, and soon after his victories over these levels, he would make the decision to switch to PC. After the switch, his skill increased, as to be expected, and before he knew it he would be beating things like Windy, Landscape, and Hypersonic. Of course, it was nearing to mid-2017 when he beat these levels, and they definitely weren't as impressive as they would have been if he played earlier in the game's history, but coming off the back of mobile they were promising achievements. This showed his room for improvement, and anyone with a trained eye would see that Tech was going to start getting good sooner rather than later. And this prophecy would come true. In a short time, he would go from things like Hypersonic to levels like Retention, Blade of Justice, ABP, and Bloodbath. This would be around the time he would get 144 Hz, and this would give him the skill boost that explained the sudden flux of skill. Soon though, this list of extremes that had fallen to him would grow longer and longer, and with Artificial Ascent, Aftermath, Digital Ascent, and Sonic Wave all falling to him 2 years ago, he was definitely one of the most underrated players in the game at the time. But this skill boost wouldn't stop there. He would continue beating top demons, from Yatagarasu to Zafkiel, a Gamma Coin update, Bowser Vortex, Infernal Abyss, and plenty more. He was starting to get more attention as a player, hitting 1,000 subscribers in June of 2018. He was still criminally underrated, though, as he was definitely a top 5 player at this point. His biggest goal right now is to complete Bloodlust, the current number 1 demon, but that would be a level that would have to wait as he focused on other projects. Something that interfered with his plans was Photovoltaic Act 2, a level that Nobleboy was supposed to verify, which he then dropped and gave to Tech. On top of this, he would get an opportunity to verify the second level in the Greek letter series by Mindcap, Sigma, and he was filled with big level verifications that would finally give him the recognition he deserved. On October 18th, 2018, he would verify Photovoltaic Act 2 after 12k attempts. Next he would start progressing on Sigma, and he did a nice run of 65 to 100, while also achieving records of 35%, 58%, 72%, and 95% before the turn of the year. This would be the end of 2018 for Tech, a very productive year, but 2019 would be even crazier. It started out with a bang, with him verifying Sigma on January 2nd, and this completion gave him a huge amount of well-deserved attention. He definitely would not stop here, though. His next achievements would be Spatial Rend and Phobos, but these would be minor compared to his next victory. After starting the level a little under a year ago, on February 15th, 2019, he would complete Bloodlust. This was an unreal victory for Tech, and it took him 27,000 attempts, truly establishing himself as one of the best players around. This would be the beginning of his reign as the #1 player. He nearly had the entire top 5 complete with no FPS bypass, but there was one level he had left to complete, Plasma Pulse Finale. And on February 25th, 2019, a mere 10 days after he beat Bloodlust, he would beat PPF and secure the top 5. This was an insane achievement, and it laid for the foundations of the new age of top 10 extreme demons to be built. Unfortunately, Tech would lose his title of beating the entire top 5 when Zodiac was hack verified and placed as #1 on the list. But this only motivated him to try and become the first to beat it. And a month after playing the level, he beat it in 25,000 attempts, an insanely small amount for a level of that difficulty and arguably his best achievement. This was in the center of his career as being the best player, and he would only continue from here. His next project would be Ragnarok, a verification that he undertook from Nobleboy. In between playing Ragnarok, he would beat WoW and Freedom 08, and he eventually verified it on May 20th. From here, he would start grinding list points and get his point to create stats up, and in the coming months he would beat extremes like Erebus, Distraught, Devil Vortex, Missing Benefits, Generic Wave, Titan Complex, and many others before he was interrupted by another verification project. This would be Ouroboros, Vibrant's new extreme demon project that had been in the waiting for multiple years. There was tons of hype behind this level, and it was the perfect storm combined with Tech's momentum from all the extremes he had been beating. This was a top 15 level, and in July of 2018, he verified Oro, giving him another huge boost in subs and notoriety. He wouldn't stop here though. After Oro, he continued the demon list grind, completing Lucid Nightmares, Delta Interface, Hyperparacosm, Anoxism, Paroxysm, Boo-TT3, Artifice, Balok, Visible Ray, Athanatos, Ethereal Artifice, Furious Flames, and a bunch more. Though he kept up the insane streak with all his extremes, he unfortunately lost his unofficial title as best player, with other top players overtaking him and outplaying his achievements. He would start slowing down, not beating demons nearly as fast as he had been in his prime, but he did continue beating very hard levels, such as Arctic Lights, Omega, Kinos, and eventually the new #1 demon, Tartarus. Today, Tech still frequently beats extremes and does Geometry Dash live streams on Twitch, but sadly, his crown as the best player was taken for good. I doubt he will ever get back to the level of hype and lead he had when he was at his prime, but there's no forgetting how he was the first to beat the top 5 with no FPS bypass, as well as his completion over things like Bloodlust and Zodiac. His rise to the top is definitely a tale worth mentioning in this video, and he can definitely be considered one of the best GD players in history. And even though he has fallen from that title in modern era, the grip he had in the top playing scene a year ago was unmatched and cannot be ignored. I'm sure you all know who the final player for this video is, but before I start talking about him, I want to address a few players who probably seem like they should have been mentioned, but failed to be. The first of these is Lukalizer. Lukalizer is part of a very large debate at the current moment as to if he is the most raw-skilled player, and if I'm going to be honest, he most likely is. He's already one of the best players in the world, and the fact that he only plays on 144 Hz and that he could upgrade to 240 and be a monster only enforces this point. When you look at how someone like Minecraft gained a massive skill boost from getting 240, who knows how good Luke could get with it. But that's exactly the problem. Luke has remarkable raw skill, but until he gets 240 and accesses his full potential, his achievements will never surpass the current #1 player and therefore cannot be considered the best. You can say all you want that he could be the best player, but until he actually is, he can't be included on this list. This is the same for players like Minecrafted, Swyborg, Dolphy, and so many others. Their achievements and skill on their own are absolutely insane, but when matched up against the #1 player they don't surpass. It's unfortunate that they can't be considered because of this, but at the end of the day it all comes down to when you play the game and who the top player is at the time. If any of those demon slayers I previously mentioned were at their current level back when someone like Wushi or Tech was the top player, they definitely would have been on the list. I hope you guys can understand this, and with that out of the way, let's talk about the final entrant for best player of all time. The final player we have to talk about today is one who has risen up from the shadows and quickly established himself as the greatest player of the game's modern era by far, with no one coming close to the level of skill and achievements he has accomplished. As I'm sure you all expecting, the player I am talking about is N-Swish. Currently the #1 player in the Demons List stats viewer and the most decorated player of all time when it comes to list demons completed, no one even comes close. N-Swish didn't start out like this, though. His first extreme demon recording would be Cataclysm, which he would beat over 3 years ago, in January of 2017. This victory would be a direct result of him switching to 144 Hz, and his skill would only grow from here. After this, he would beat Bloodbath in 9,000 attempts, and though he gained very little attention, the minuscule amount of attempts he took alongside the back of the victory of these extreme demons hinted at a very skilled player. It would be 2 days before he beat his next extreme, completing Aftermath in 4,000 attempts, and you can tell how skilled he was right from the beginning of his career. N-Swish wouldn't beat another extreme for a few months after that, but on the first day of 2018, he would upload an insane victory of Sonic Wave while it was still the #1 demon. This would take him 14,000 attempts, and he still didn't even have 200 subscribers. After this, he would take a break from beating hard levels, and over the next few months he wouldn't come close to the skill he had demonstrated in the first month or so of his channel. He would continue to grind the top 10, though, beating levels like Yatagarasu, and in between then and February of 2019 he would beat Erebus, Spatial Rend, Plasma Pulse Finale, and Bloodlust, the #1 demon. This would all be on bypass, though, and therefore his list records could not be accepted. After having all these completed, he only had 2 levels in the top 10 to beat, Devil Vortex and Celestial Force. He would grind both of these out in February and become the first player to beat the top 10 after Bloodlust was rated, despite it being done on bypass, which is why we think of that title going to people like Tech. His next move would be verify Rage by XGen and more, and in the time between when he beat the top 10 and now, many new demons had been rated and added to the list, including Zodiac. N-Swish would quickly take care of Titan Complex, the level that had been recently placed at #9, but Zodiac would take him a lot longer. He would practice it alongside other lower list demons like Bausha Vortex, Innards, Stalemite Redux, Catalyze, and WoW, and as he did this, Koareta and Crimson Planet were rated and added to the list. This meant N-Swish had 3 new top 10s to secure his victory over the 10 hardest levels again, and he stepped up to the challenge. On May 8th of 2019, he would beat Koareta, and on May 25th he would beat Crimson Planet, but Zodiac still had yet to fall to him. He had been practicing it on and off ever since it had been rated and added at #1, but eventually, a little under a month after Crimson Planet, he would beat it. This wouldn't mean he could rest yet, though. He had the #1 demon under his belt, but Lucid Nightmares, Deimos, and Visible Ray had been added and rated on the list, meaning he would need to pay those levels some attention. But as he progressed on these and eventually beat them, new levels kept trickling into the top 10, and by September of 2019, he had completed Ragnarok, Arctic Lights, Ouroboros, Sigma, Ragnarok, and a few other levels. He was absolutely smashing the demons list, and his true potential was starting to shine through in the months that had come after Zodiac. On September 14th, 2019, he would beat the Yandere, meaning, though on bypass, he would have completed the entire top 25 hardest demons. He did acquire a real 240Hz monitor at this point, but a number of his previous victories over top 10s were on bypass, meaning the list did not consider them acceptable. He would definitely not stop here, though. Continuing the impressive grind, he would beat a number of lower tier listed demons alongside verifying a top 10 level in the form of Cognition. The amount of extremes he would grind from here is ridiculous, and there are tens upon tens of them, so I won't be going into detail about everyone he beat. Some of the notable ones, though, were levels like Macabre and Digital Descent. Every time a new demon was put into the top 25, he would quickly take care of it, with some prime examples being Kinos, Rinavent, and Calculator Core. At this point, there was virtually no player who even came close to what N-Swish had achieved, and he wasn't done yet. On February 21st, N-Swish would announce that he'd be verifying the Golden by Bow and More, a top 5 extreme that had been passed amongst numerous verifiers before giving it to him. N-Swish decided that he wanted to buff the level to #1 on the list, and his next 6 videos would be him making progress bit by bit on this beast of a level. After he got 35% on the super buffed version, he would take a break and go rebeat some of his old bypass top 50 demons, such as Bloodlust, PPF, Gamma, Erebus, Spatial Rend, Yatagarasu, and a couple more. He would also beat Tartarus on March 30th of 2020, the newly verified top 1 demon. From here, N-Swish would grind the Golden all the way to completion, with it going through some nerfs and rebuffs as time went on. After deaths at 73%, 86%, and 94%, he would finally verify the highly anticipated extreme on April 18th, 2020. This would take him 52,000 attempts, and the level was placed at #1, though it's been since moved down to #2 below Tartarus. This wouldn't be the end of N-Swish's grind, though. He would continue to work his way down the list, completing Taprek, Aquatic Auroras, Prismatic Haze, Wasureta, Thinking Space, Freedom 08, Omega, Spectrum Cyclone, Aronia, Dark Flare, and many other difficult levels. As he grinded the list, it seemed like he might actually beat the entire top 50. Alongside this, he would also verify arguably his greatest achievement, Ithacropolis Circles by Norkborg and more, which unfortunately has not yet been rated. But in all seriousness, I seriously think the past 2 or 3 months has been N-Swish's biggest demonstration that he is without a doubt the best player in the game right now. The sheer amount of demons he beat in this time period up until now, especially considering the large portion of them were top 30 levels, is a ridiculous thing to realize. and as he continued to pick off more and more list demons, it became clearer to what he was trying to do. On September 9th, 2020, about a month ago, Nswish would beat Fabrication, the final level in top 75 he had yet to complete. This made Nswish the first player in history to not only beat the entire top 50, but also to beat the entire top 75, an absolutely absurd achievement, and if that doesn't highlight his skill as one of the best GD players of all time, then I don't know what to tell you. Despite the amount of ridiculously skilled players we have today, none of them can even come close to Nswish. Fortunately, most of the community seems to agree with this sentiment, and it's a pretty accepted fact today that Nswish is the best player we currently have. Nswish came from beating Cataclysm some 3 years ago to today being the #1 player on the Point Your Crate stats viewer, and the only player in history to beat the entire main demons list. And if that doesn't prove that he's a god of today's player base, then I don't think anything can. We don't know what Nswish plans to do in the future, if he will continue to go for the entire extended list, if he will try to secure his grip on the entire top 75 by beating new demons like Cold Sweat, or if he will just let go of any sort of schedule and play the game when he feels like it. Whatever he does, he has done more than enough to secure his legacy as the best player of today's modern era in the GD community, and he will definitely go down in history as an unforgettable legend. And there it is. My rundown of what I think the 10 best players in this game's history are for their respective time periods. Again, I'm aware that there are a bunch of players on here I could have included, and it was just down to my personal judgment whether I left the current ones on or swapped them out, and I'm sure you guys can understand that. I do want to say that this video was not a solo effort. There were many people I quickly consulted about various topics to fact check and make sure I had stories straight, as well as to make sure my list was accurate, but the two main people who gave me the most input were Komp and Icedcave, so I want to give them a massive thank you. This video could not have been made without their willingness to help. This is definitely the video that took me the most work to get out, as the script and editing were much more than I'm used to, but I managed to bring it out for you guys. Sorry it's so long, but it had to be if I wanted to cover so many periods of the game with proper context, so if you made it this far I really appreciate it. I really hope you guys enjoyed this massive video, as I poured my heart into it to make it the best it could be, and I hope that it reflects in its quality. If you did like it, you could always consider subscribing, but there's no pressure. By the way, I'm just going to say thank you in advance for 5k, as we are 20 subs away, and I expect I'll be hitting it shortly after uploading this video. You guys are the best, and my 5k special is in the works, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, this video has surely gone on long enough, so I will cut the outro here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.